Let's start with a premise that might be deeply uncomfortable for many listening. If your life hasn't fundamentally shifted in the last 5 years, what if it's not because you lack the ability, the network, or the intelligence, but because you haven't changed the core architecture of who you believe you are? We often mistake being busy for being transformative, but the internal foundation remains static.
That hits home. Most people listening aren't incompetent. They are highly capable, experienced professionals. Yet there's this sense of an invisible ceiling. It feels like no matter how hard you push against the external world, there's a cap on your progress. It's frustrating because it feels like the world is holding you back.
Neville Goddard would argue that the ceiling isn't external at all. In his seminal work, Prayer, the Art of Believing, he dismantles the traditional notion of prayer. To Goddard, prayer isn't a petition to a distant deity or a plea for change. It is the act of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. It's not about hoping for a future event. It's about moving into the psychological state of that event being a present tense reality, not waiting, but being.
But that's where the immediate resistance kicks in, especially for the pragmatic professional. If someone is mid-career, dealing with real-world responsibilities, mortgages, and corporate politics, how do they feel it's done when their physical senses and bank accounts clearly say it isn't? It feels like gaslighting oneself.
Goddard addresses that tension through what he calls the Law of Reversibility. In physics, if heat can produce mechanical motion, then mechanical motion can produce heat. He applies this logic to the mind. If a physical fact, like a promotion, can produce a specific psychological state of confidence, then a deeply assumed psychological state of confidence can in turn produce the physical fact. It's an inverse relationship where the internal state reorganizes the external behavior and environment to match it.
So from a technical perspective, this isn't just positive thinking. It's more akin to identity alignment. It resonates with modern cognitive science regarding neuroplasticity. If you consistently fire the neural pathways associated with a specific identity, your brain begins to filter the environment for opportunities that align with that identity. You don't rise to your goals, you rise to the state of consciousness you consistently occupy.
Exactly. But there is a distinct fear that comes with this, particularly for those who have more to lose. At 25, failure is seen as experimentation. At 40 or 50, public failure feels like exposure. It feels like a risk to assume a new identity without proof first.
That's where Goddard's distinction between the conscious and subconscious mind becomes critical. The conscious mind is the gatekeeper. It analyzes, critiques, and looks at real circumstances. But the subconscious mind is the engine. It accepts assumptions as truth without judgment and builds your entire behavioral operating system around them. If your assumption is that I'm competent but not exceptional, that becomes the invisible script for your life.
And mid-career stagnation is rarely a lack of skill. It's an assumption-based prison. You don't apply for that executive role because your assumption is that someone else is more qualified. You don't speak up in the boardroom because your internal script says now isn't the time. You don't expand your business because you assume it's safer to stay small. You are essentially a prisoner of your own self-concept.
Goddard introduces a specific methodology to break this: controlled reverie. This isn't just idle daydreaming. It's a deliberate, relaxed mental state where you assume the identity of the version of yourself who has already achieved the outcome. You aren't fantasizing about the results. You are embodying the person who naturally produces those results. It's a subtle but profound shift.
Right. Instead of visualizing the applause at the end of a speech, you visualize being the person who is so secure in their value that they don't even need the applause. The identity shift must precede the outcome. Goddard goes as far as to say that imagination and faith are the only faculties needed to create your conditions. But we have to redefine faith here. It's not a religious emotion, it's psychological certainty.
Psychological certainty without evidence is a terrifying prospect for most high achievers. We are trained to look at data, evidence, and past performance. To ignore the evidence of the senses feels like a leap into the void.
But consider this. We already live by certainty without evidence, just in the opposite direction. Most people have an absolute, unwavering certainty that this is as far as I go, or I'm just not the type of person who makes 7 figures. We have total faith in our limitations. Stagnation isn't a passive state. It is an active act of belief in one's current boundaries.
That's a heavy realization. It means our current reality is actually a testament to how successful we are at manifesting our current, perhaps limited, assumptions. Goddard notes in Chapter 5 that these assumptions shape not just our own behavior, but how others respond to us.
If you change your internal conception, the world literally reorganizes its response to you.
Think about it in a practical setting, like a high-stakes negotiation. If you internally assume you belong at the highest level, your nonverbal cues change. Your posture shifts, your tone stabilizes. Your contributions become decisive rather than cautious. You stop asking for permission, because in your mind, the permission was granted the moment you assumed the state. The world doesn't give you what you want. It gives you who you are.
This leads to his most intense claim in the final chapter, the concept of I am. It's the idea of claiming a state of being before there is any physical evidence for it. It's bold, almost audacious. It's about assuming the highest possible self-concept available to you and letting your entire reality reorganize around that new center of gravity.
In this framework, prayer is identity rehearsal. Stagnation is identity repetition. If you are stuck, you are simply repeating an old version of yourself every single morning. You are praying to the God of the way things have always been.
It removes blame from the economy, the boss, or luck, which is empowering but also deeply confronting. It means your current life is perfectly loyal to the person you believe yourself to be. It's a mirror that doesn't lie.
So we leave you with this. If you stopped begging the universe for outcomes, if you stopped asking for permission to be successful, and instead assumed the deep psychological identity of the person who naturally and effortlessly produces those outcomes, what parts of your current self would you have to let die to allow that new person to live? The door to your cage has been open the entire time. You have simply been convinced that you are the cage itself.